Hi guys, Ryuu here from Blender Bros and welcome to part 3 in which we're going to be rendering this scene. Now before we render we need to take care of a few things. First of all, you will notice that this ship is really dark. So when I'm going to render this, a lot of parts here are going to be almost pure black. And the reason for that is that, some of the really dark mattes were used here, but also they're quite reflective, and this is what's causing, this matte to look really deep. Also, we're shooting against the sun because the sun highlights this side of the vessel, but this one is in shadow. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a very simple trick, which is basically making mattes brighter. So go to the matte here and grab this and simply make it brighter, okay? A little bit, right? Same as this one, simply make it brighter and everything should be fine. So here too, let's make it brighter. And let's grab these legs and make them brighter too. And this engine here as well. And this should be better. So let's go to camera and see that. This is much better. It's already much brighter. And the same with the human. It's a little bit dark. So what we can do is, brighten him up a bit, okay? Right? So it's going to be a bit brighter and better, more visible. Kind of looks like a human with a kind of a sci-fi armor or something. These exhausts here, they're also a little bit dark, so we can, pump them up a little bit. And the emission, we can pump up a little bit to make it a bit stronger. So maybe like, 20 or something. And same here, and the emission here could be stronger. That's cool. And let me see that. This gun here is fine. That's fine. No, this window needs to be dark. We could make this a little bit brighter. Just a little bit. But, don't overdo it. That's cool. Some of the tower, certain parts here could be a little bit brighter. So we could just, brighten them up a bit to make this tower just a little bit brighter, but not too much. You don't want to make it too bright, okay? Awesome. So that's that. And now we need to prepare our rendering scene, okay? So we need to do a few things, all right? First of all, on the render, what I want you to do is I want you to set samples to maybe 300. Go to light path here and set it to 12, 8, and maybe 8. And I think that will do. And volume, set it to 8 as well, because we're going to be using volumetrics. Also, what we need to do is, now on the performance here, what you need to do is, you could keep 2048, but if you have a lower end card or some older card, you might want to switch it to 1024 or lower, like 256. This basically shows what's the size of a tile that your graphic card is going to render, in one go. My case is 2K, and this is kind of a pretty optimal for 390. The same settings I'll be using for like 2080 Ti, but anything below like 1080 GTX, for example, I'll be going with 1024, so a bit lower, okay? The other things are fine. Also here, GPU compute, that's a must, and you should be good to go. In terms of compositing, we're going to have to set a few things. So let's go to compositing, and I need you to set this node tree, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to first click here on use nodes, and you're going to see this node, which is render layers, and this one, composite, they're going to show in your scene. And you need to create other nodes. So the way you do that, first of all, let's go here and go to preferences and enable add-on called node wrangler, which is very important, okay? Node wrangler. Click on this and save preferences, all right? Now, I want you to add a few nodes. So Shift A and type denoise and add the denoise add node and add here. And then glare and add it in here. Then color ramp and add it here. And to add this add node, what you need to do is click on the color ramp and press Ctrl+ on a numpad. And if you expand this, you'll see we're going to have this node here, okay? So I need you to add that. Next thing what you need to do is go here to this tab, all right, to the layer properties, and enable two things. One is mist, and the other one is denoising, okay? You're going to see additional nodes popping up in here. So you see there's a mist and denoiser. And now you need to connect the normal, denoising normal to normal on denoise, denoising albedo to albedo, and connect the noise through glare to composite, okay? Then I want you to connect mist to color ramp, connect the color ramp to the image here on the bottom, right? Connect this image to this image here and add image to this view node. And the viewer node, simply type viewer, and you're gonna see viewer node and pop it in, okay? Cool. Then once you do that, click on backdrop and you're gonna be able to see backdrop later on here. The settings here, I'll be using default, except for this glare, which I would switch to fog glow and switch the quality here to high, okay? The rest could be, for now, default. Don't worry about this. This has nothing to do with this tutorial, okay? So set them up and you should be good to go. Let me explain what these nodes are doing. First of all, Compositor is something that kicks in after the render is finished. So when you finish a render, you can actually keep adjusting these settings to affect your render. So for instance, when the render finishes and the Compositor kicks in, we're going to have first of all, the Denoiser kicking in, which is going to clean up the image. So all these fireflies and nasty effects are gone from the shadowy areas. Glare will actually kick in with the beautiful bloom. So all the engines, the sun, you can see there's a bloom around it. And the higher you go on the bloom, on the glare settings, the more, the more effect you're going to have. And then the bottom nodes are for the mist pass. So when I'm going to actually connect the viewer here to the mist pass, so to these nodes, I can adjust it with my slider of this color ramp. And Compositor, we're going to recalculate the render. And you can see that I can remove this mist from the dark areas. I can amplify it in the brighter areas. I can even add one more slider here in the middle if I wanted to click on this plus. And I can fine-tune it with this. So it kind of works like curves in Photoshop or like a blend if in Photoshop. It's the same principle. You can press Ctrl and Shift and you can switch between image, alpha, mist, right? You just wait a little bit for it to kick in. There you go. And then denoising, normal, denoising, albedo, etc. And the viewer node is going to jump, but you can also connect it manually back to the mist pass. So you can see the mist pass preview in here, okay? So there you go, and this is how Compositor works. And if you want to turn it off, you simply, click it off in here, and then the Compositor will not kick in after the render is finished. Once you set it up, go back to layout, and we're going to be able to run a test render, okay? Before you render, if you're struggling, if your computer is struggling with memory, and you can check it here by right-clicking on this bar and adding video memory, and you will see how much memory your card is using, okay? Mine is using 10 out of 24 gigs. So if you're getting kind of really close to the limit, what you can do is you can go to 3D viewport and the usage of the RAM is going to drop, VRAM is going to drop dramatically. So you can actually render the image, not in the render view, but in the viewport view, because you're in a 3D viewport, which is going to be way easier on your card, okay? We're going to actually add one more thing here, which is going to be volumetrics, okay? Now volumetrics, to add volumetrics, you need to add a cube, all right, in cycles. Make this larger, okay, to encompass the entire scene that camera sees, and scale it down to maybe this size, maybe a little bit bigger. And then what we need to do is add a material to it, okay? Go to shader editor here, like that, all right? And we can delete this, all right? We don't need that. What we need is a volumetrics, okay? So we're gonna press Shift-A, and we're gonna type principal volume, okay? So volume. And principled volume, plug it in, and the volume to volume. Now you'll see it's gonna be a very dense smoke, but we're going to change the density of it to 0.1 or 0.01, and it's gonna be way less dense, but kind of really cool. So we can actually grab this color from the scene and make it really warm. It's gonna add to the atmosphere. Click on the camera and Control 0. Now this volumetric is going to really kick in some VRAM usage, so be careful. And now what you can do, you can actually bump it up, okay? So select the cube, right, this one. You can actually rename it to volume, right? And if I can spell it, there we go. And you can adjust it here. So we could, for example, go a bit higher, 0.2, right? It's going to be really dense, kind of like almost like a desert storm. I think this is too dense, so I'm going to go, with maybe 0.01. And this should be fine. So it adds a little bit of character to this image. Now the problem is this is going to be that if I'm going to zoom in here very closely, you will see that we're going to have some fireflies. These are fireflies. And I could use this denoiser through the compositor to clean it up, but I also want to have a noisy image on this desert because it kind of adds like a texture to this desert It looks like a sand. So I really want to keep that, okay? So this is really important. Now let me see this human, if it's really on the ground, because it's really essential. Yeah, it's on the ground. That's pretty cool. Okay, cool. All right, awesome. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna render a few images because we will need one that's actually noisy, other one that's actually clean. We're gonna need a cutout and a mist pass, okay? So now the compositor here, the compositor settings, these settings are for mist pass. So once we render, I'm gonna show you how to play with these, okay? So let's go to layout. And let's render this image first. Just a quick interjection, guys, here in terms of renders. Now, for those of you who are using NVIDIA cards, especially the latest RTX cards, what you might want to do is go here to preferences and switch from CUDA to optics. Now, in previous versions of Blender, this was crushing on me, especially when I was using decals or some textures in Blender. But I think they've ironed it out and it's pretty stable. So I encourage you to try optics because it's much faster. It's about 20 to 30% faster, maybe even more than that, depending on the scene and setup, etc. on your hardware. But try optics, okay? So this is for, again, NVIDIA cards, all right? Save preferences and you're good to go. Now, in terms of denoising, there's a new option right here under render. So you can choose to go either with the node denoising through Compositor or this one. In terms of time, this one is a little bit, the one in render is a little bit quicker because it's optimized for NVIDIA cards, especially the optics version. And I'm going to show you just in a minute. But in terms of quality, they basically more or less the same, okay? I've noticed that this denoiser is a little bit stronger. Whereas this one, the built-in denoiser, is a little bit less destructive on details sometimes, but again, it depends on a scene. So to turn this off, okay, and use this denoiser, what you need to do is hold Control and right-click and drag your mouse to cut these nodes here. And then you just simply connect image to glare. You can go here and turn off this denoising data because you don't need it. And now this denoiser is bypassed, right? So now what we need to do is go back to layout and actually enable denoiser under our render tab. So go here and turn it on. Now, when you click this button, you will see that you have some options here. By default, however, what you might want to do is switch from open image denoise to optics. Now, some people say that the optics is over smoothing things, but to be honest, I actually think that the optics is identical in quality of denoising to this node denoiser. So whether you use this one, the optics, or this one in nodes, it doesn't really matter. This one is a little bit here, and the one in the render tab is a little bit quicker because again, it's an optics which is optimized for NVIDIA GPUs. So now I've noticed that the render time between rendering in this scene in CUDA took me about 1 minute, 11, 12 seconds, whereas optics was taking me about 50 seconds. And when I turned on this denoiser through optics, I saved another 3 seconds. So I managed to render it in 47 or 45 seconds, including the injection of the compositor at the end. So really quick. So I saved about, 25 seconds in total, which is quite a lot of time, especially when you want to render some larger images or you're rendering animations, right? Because when you render animations, that's where the time really matters because, it's hundreds of thousands of frames, right? So anyway, that's it. Just a quick info for you guys. Play with these. But now, this seems to be a very stellar option from NVIDIA and Blender developers. So it's a really great step forward. So let's go to render and let's render it, okay? This vehicle is still dark, it's still dark. I think I can make it a bit more bright. I think it's still too dark. I really think so. This could change when we're going to add mist pass to it, but still it's a little bit dark. What we could do is render this as is and increase the black point. So kind of lift the black point in Photoshop. This is something that we could do. You see the rendering now is a bit slower because we're using volumetrics, so it has a little bit more particles to render, but this is really dark. This is really dark. Let's see what's going to happen when the compositor kicks in and cleans this image. Let's see what's going to happen. Maybe it's going to be a bit better, but I think it's a little bit still too dark. Yeah, it's a bit too dark. I think I'm going to go easy on that. So let's click on this and let's just lift it a little bit more, a little bit more on these elements here. I think that's better. I think that's much better. Okay. Yeah, see now the visibility of this vessel is, of the texture and details, it's much better. You can actually see the outline and all these details here, the plating, all the small lights, etc. It's a little bit better. Of course, it's gonna be dark because we're shooting against the light, which makes sense. But still, it was a little bit too dark for my liking. All right. Also, when when you create composites like this, you need to understand that you cannot really have shadows darker than, the darkest areas here on this desert, although the sand is pretty bright, so the sun will reflect and the shadow is going to be a bit brighter here than on the vessel, which makes sense. But still, you don't want to make it too dark because it's going to be too contrasty and it's going to be pulling too much attention in your image. And you don't really want that. You want a kind of like a nice blend sort of a starting point to begin your composite, okay? Yeah, this is looking pretty good. Now let's see the when the compositor kicks in. Should clean the image pretty nicely. There we go. Bloom injected. Awesome. So you see, that's really clean. Cleaned all the fireflies, all the garbage. But now the sand is really bland and there's no texture on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this first, okay? We're going to save that. So save as. And we're going to save it as render 1, okay? So scene, render 1, all right? And let's save it. Now we're going to go here and we're going to check how the viewer node looks. And this is a mist pass render, okay? We want that. Now, I'm going to save that, but I think I prefer the one with noise. Although this one looks like it's actually pretty cool. So let's save it too, okay? So save as, and it's going to be scene render 1 mist. And make sure that you're saving as a TIFF. This is really important, okay? This is really good quality file. Not as good as the OpenEXR, but OpenEXR is an absolute bastard to open with Photoshop. So use TIFF, RGBA, and 16-bit. That's really important because it's going to be way more information in the file, okay? And you can save it as a mist. That's cool. Let's go back to this render result. And by the way, if you want to, you could always preview your mist pass in compositing. So when you go here and you're going to shift control click on this node, you can switch between different states, okay? So you can see the image, then it's alpha, mist, okay? Then it's denoising normal, albedo, and denoising depth. So this is really cool, okay? Make sure that the backdrop is turned on. And you need to have this viewer node enabled, all right? Let me just plug it back in here so I can preview this mist. This is really looking pretty cool. I like that. Cool. So let's go back. Now what we're going to do, we're going to turn off the denoiser, okay? That's really important. We're going to switch this denoiser off, right? And we're going to switch these off and we're going to run the image to glare, okay? So we're going to bypass the denoiser. What's going to happen is going to render the image without denoising, okay, at the end. It's going to be a bit more grainy, but that's what I want. I want a grainy image for the desert, okay? So let's try that. Let's close it here. And by the way, if you want to unplug a node like I just did, what you need to do is hold Control and right click and draw like a line, and it's going to cut through any nodes that are connected, okay? So let's go here and make this bigger. And you see that now we're going to be getting the fireflies here. See that? This is what the denoiser was cleaning, but I really want that for this kind of like a texture look here. So I really want this for this kind of like a grainy texture of the sand. Looks really awesome. And we can recover this by simply overlaying this vehicle in Photoshop and cleaning that up. So that's really cool. And we got this grainy texture, perfect. And a bit of fireflies, not too bad actually, but we're gonna clean that. Perfect. So let's save that, and we're gonna save that as server 1 noise. Okay, and then we need one more, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're going to go to layout, and what I wanna do now is I wanna turn off everything. So I wanna turn off the volumetrics, okay? I want to turn off the background, right? And I wanna turn off on the transparency of this lighting. So go to render tab, scroll down again here, go to film and turn on transparent. This is going to allow us to render just the cutouts of these elements and will enable us to select them very easily in Photoshop. So simply go to render image, and we can render this very quickly. The quality doesn't matter. All it matters is that you have this clean. And also one more thing. Let's stop that. We need to turn off glare, and I'll tell you why. This glare is going to be enhancing bloom here, and this bloom is going to be actually spilling outside of the selection of this engine. So we need to turn off the glare node. So let's go here, and we can completely turn off the composite, to be honest. Just turn it off, go to layout, and then we can render this, and I think it should be fine. Cool, that was really quick, 7 seconds. Save as, and we're going to call it cutout. Okay, and save. All right, cool. Now make sure that you save this as RGBA, because if you don't, you will not be able to see that alpha background, this transparent background. Is really important. Okay, so here we can turn it back on. So the background, the volume, right, and make sure you're gonna turn on the transparency here. We can collapse these nodes. So go here to 3D viewport, and now we can actually save this. So this is going to be. Let's just actually pack resources to Blender. So we're going to pack all the decals because there are decals on this vessel. And then I'm going to save it as Course 5 Final. Now I cannot provide you with this robot. I'm going to have to remove it from the file, but I'm going to give you the rest of this environment so you can actually see all the settings. You can download it and have fun with it, okay? Cool. So now in the next video, what we're going to do, we're going to dive into Photoshop and we're going to start editing these images. So we need to load all 4 of them and we can start compositing the final image. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 4.